This episode offers psychosocial education designed to inspire and motivate our listeners. The information provided does not constitute a therapeutic relationship nor a substitute for professional mental health care. If you are experiencing a mental health crisis, call 911, go to your nearest emergency room, or for listeners in the United States, text 988 for the National Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Warning, this episode contains brain food that will lead to improved emotional and social intelligence. Thanks for tuning in to Harvesting Happiness today for a healthy serving of consciously prepared brain food. This is Lisa Cypers Kamen, your host. Since 2010, we've been broadcasting sound ideas for better well-being. Each week, we spotlight diverse thinkers and doers who are contemporary trendsetters and change agents, devoting their lives to creating a better world. I invite you to listen and change how you think about human happiness. Our award-winning content is fresh, optimistic, and purpose-driven media that promotes well-being from the inside out. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. Thanks for joining me on today's show, where you will learn about public perception, the psychology behind public acceptance of misinformation and political rumors. My guest today is Dr. Adam Berinsky.
He is the Mitsui Professor of Political Science at MIT and a faculty affiliate at the Institute for Data, Systems, and Society, a leading expert on political behavior and public opinion. He has spent the last 15 years researching the spread of political rumors and misinformation and how they shape our democracy. He is the author of the newly released Political Rumors: Why We Accept Misinformation and How to Fight It. Adam, thank you so much for being here, because this subject gets me riled up.
Well, thank you for having me.
Let's talk about misinformation, disinformation, and how difficult it is to correct it or mitigate it.
Yeah, I mean, so misinformation is not a new problem. So there's been political rumors in the U.S. since the founding, kind of thoughts about the French, Canadians, the British. So, I mean, this is nothing new. So, anyone who's familiar with the JFK assassination rumors, going into the 70s. So this is nothing new, but, it's something that has become sort of more the forefront of the political landscape, in the last 15 years or so. And as you said, it's really hard to correct misinformation once it's out there. Sort of once something's loose in the environment, it's really hard to get it back in the cage.
It's funny you say that, because I have brought facts to people's attention based upon, they say, well, this is what the reality is. And I say, no, it's misinformation, it's disinformation. And here are the facts. Here is the study. Here are the citations. And they still will not believe it.
Yeah. I mean, so, this is, when I started this project about 15 years ago, right, the thought was, if we have bad information, we just need to bring back good information and people will change their minds. But as it happens, if I say something that you don't like, you can change your view of your opinions, or you can change your view of me, right? It's much easier to change your view of the person correcting your information than it is to change your beliefs itself. And so, this gets at notions of fact checkers that, back in the 2000s, 2010s, there was a lot of emphasis put on the importance of having fact checkers, right? Bringing experts in to say, this claim is supported, this claim is not supported, this is the truth, this is misinformation. But that's all predicated on people accepting the authority of the fact checkers. And so again, like on one side of the divide, if you don't like what the fact checkers are saying, it's very easy to say, like, oh, they're just biased, right? It's
to
just
discredit the fact checker.
Exactly. And, to dismiss them out of, so not even just to discredit them, but to basically say there's no source of authority there, right? These are just people who are biased, who are putting their political views forward, and their so-called facts are not the real facts. And, this gets at questions of the alternative facts, right? And kind of flexible reality there. But, again, this is nothing new, sort of the question of authority, who gets to decide what is the truth or not, right? This is something that it's constant in societies over time. It's just something that's really come to the head because we get a kind of a real split in the present day between, sort of people who are stick to their beliefs and other people who say that they want to rationally evaluate the evidence. And just it's really hard to have a conversation between those two kinds of people.
It sure is. I mean, and it is, as many people who are listening and many people, maybe even between you and I, know that it has polarized people and families because of one's beliefs then become personal, like as you're saying, separate from the facts, and therein lies the family feud, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And this I find heartbreaking. But how can we, if we can, get people to say, all right, I am going to rely on facts. I am going to defer to the research. I am going to pay attention. Are we beyond that? Is it that we throw up our hands and say, well, whatever?
Yeah, that's a very depressing thought.
Terrible thought.
And so, there's it depends on the day you catch me. Some days I'm like, yep, that's where we are. But I do think that there is a potential solution. Another way to think about this is that, take fact checkers, for instance, right? The idea there is that we have experts who are, sort of trained journalists, trained researchers who can say, these claims are supported by the evidence and these aren't. And it's great to have experts doing that, right? But these people aren't necessarily the best people to deliver the message. And so what I think is really important is to separate out the message from the messenger, right? So think about having an expert decide or determine, what are the facts, but then finding the right person to deliver that message. So in my work, I did some work on death panels, and death panel, it was new back when I started this project, but maybe people forget. But the Affordable Care Act had some provisions related to discussions with doctors about end of life decisions that got warped and twisted into notion that there would be death panels, that you have these government run panels to decide whether or not, grandma and grandpa get to live or die based on their worth to society, which is not true. And you had a lot of professional experts saying that these weren't true. Now, having those people deliver the message, right? Having a fact checker come in, it's like someone who's scolding you. It's just like, well, that's not really true. Here's what's true, is not necessarily the best strategy, right? Instead, have someone come in who's going to be a trusted source, a reliable source to deliver that information. So in that case, if you have nonpartisan people saying, oh, there are no death panels, just trust us, people will move their beliefs a little. But if you have Republican politicians, right, people who are speaking against their apparent interest, then that's going to be a much more effective way of correcting misinformation. But again, the key is that, we don't want to be flexible about the facts. We don't want to be flexible about determining, what experts say, but we need to be a lot more flexible in thinking about who delivers that message in a more effective way.
So it is a former believer or Kool-Aid drinker that then is moved by facts and then says, after paying attention or reading or researching, I'm really seeing that this is the reality.
Yeah, I mean, so that could be one. There could be others as well. Thinking about back to early days of the COVID vaccine, that trying to get communities that might be skeptical, right? Don't bring in, say, a doctor who's like, oh, just trust me, this is all okay. Because people, even reasonable people might say, like, well, are they just getting paid off by big pharma? Like, why are they saying this? Instead, bring in like a trusted community leader. And we saw this happen in a lot of cases there.
Yes.
So it doesn't necessarily have to be, the person who's gone through the conversion experience and has seen the light. It could be someone who is already there in the first place, someone who thinks this is really important for my community and I want to get that message out. And people are going to listen to me because I'm prominent in that community. So I think it's like really the important thing is to think creatively. I've talked over the years to lots of folks about these experiments that I've done. And I talk about my death panel experiments and they say like, okay, I got it. So the solution is we have Republicans correcting misinformation that is Republican based. And I was like, well, like that's one strategy, but then we can think about, Liz Cheney talking about election fraud after the 2000 election. Right, that didn't work so well. Liz Cheney, she's got the pedigree, the leadership, Republican leadership experience, but she was still painted as someone that we shouldn't trust.
Yeah.
So, it said like that's not the right message. The right message is let's think creatively about the messenger, and also, the starting point is separating out the message from the messenger, but we need to think really creatively about who is the best person in a given situation to deliver the message, saying, here's the facts. Here's what you, an ordinary person who doesn't have expertise, should listen to.
I think in an ideal scene, that makes perfect sense. But when we talk about the messenger being somebody, let's say, from within the Republican Party who's trying to dispel disinformation or misinformation, a lot of these people know that there's BS going on. And for whatever their interests are, or their fear, or their election status, being concerned for what's coming next within their constituency, they're not speaking up, or they're just scared.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
And I think that fear is a really big thing.
Yeah. And that's what, like I said earlier, like there's days that I get depressed about this and think, the solution. Those are the days, I think, especially thinking about what happened with Republican politicians after January 6th, who tried to dispel the myth, that I said, like, if you as a person don't like the message that you're hearing from me, you can change your view of the message, which was the hope is what would happen after January 6th, dispelling these myths of voter fraud. But instead, they changed their view of the messenger, right? In this case, again, Liz Cheney, this daughter of the former vice president, right? Basically as conservative as they come, part of Republican leadership. To me, that was an amazing, and not amazing in a good way. It was an amazing thing that basically people changed their view of her. So yes, I know. I guess that that there are days. Again, there is no magic solution there. So like what I'm really trying to do is saying, let's be creative and not to say this is going to fix everything, because it's not going to fix everything. But let's move into a strategy that it might be effective. And I think that this is, it's when I first started talking about this, I talked to different groups of politicians, policymakers. I used to have to spend a lot of time saying, just because someone is an expert in a given field, because they're trained as an expert, doesn't mean that people are automatically going to listen to them. I don't need to spend that any time anymore, because, it's very obvious that that's what's happening in the world. And so, I think what's really important is, in some ways it's good, is that we don't assume that facts are self-correcting, right? We don't assume just getting the good information out there is going to drive out the bad. So there's a better recognition of the problem, but at the same time, that's makes the solution a lot harder.
Two things come to mind. The first is the different levels of belief. That there are different kinds of believers. There's the hardcore, no matter what. I mean, I would love for you to sort of elaborate on that. And the other part of it is, instead of focusing on the messenger, maybe a different strategy is focusing on the Venn diagram, like knowing, like, we're all human, right? People who don't share the same beliefs, there is an overlap. There's this one little corner of everyone's life that does overlap. And I'm wondering if any of your research has been done on going there as the strategy. So you stay away from the disinformation or the misinformation and go to the information that we share to be true.
Yeah, no, that's a great, great point. Is, I was sort of thinking about this. That often when we think about who believes misinformation, we think about the people with the tinfoil hats and the crazy conspiracies, but that's not everyone, right? And I think it's especially important, so I'm a political scientist, so I think about politics a lot, but I also think about medicine and health and science. And I think in a lot of cases, it's not that people are necessarily misinformed in that they're embracing things that are false. It's just that they don't have a lot of information there to draw on. And so, when I talk about how people think about politics, I always tell people, these are my undergrads, or if I give talks to professionals, and I'll say your audience as well. I always tell people, the fact that you're listening to me talk about this means that you're weird, you're unusual, right? That you care about politics. Most people don't spend that time thinking about politics, for a variety of reasons. They have jobs, they have lives, they have hobbies. And so when we're thinking about this, it's really important not to think about how you and I, for example, would talk about politics, but to think, how would an average person who has a lot going on in their lives think about politics? And most of the people, most of the time, aren't paying close attention. And so that's a phase in which where you could have misinformation just that's in the information ecosystem, that's just out there, that they come
Totally.
across it. And it's not that they're embracing it. It's just that they're not, sort of like, I'm not really sure what to believe there.
So they're in the middle. They're not the hardcore. They're
Yeah.
just sort of on the average. If it's passing through their feed, it's kind of going from their eyes.
Right. Yeah. So I talk a lot in my book about incidental exposure, which
Yeah.
is a big word, big way of saying, just some way that they come across this. So it's interesting. So when I do my work, I ask questions. I survey the public, and I say, like, do you think that this particular belief is true or not? So, for example, do you think that Barack Obama was born in the U.S.? So there's been, sort of, this is actually what really got me going in the first place, is thinking about these citizenship conspiracies. But right, this notion that Barack Obama was not actually born in Hawaii, but was instead born in Kenya or Indonesia or some other place, sort of
Yes.
depends on the rumor. And so if I ask people, do you think do you believe this? Do you not believe this? Or are you not sure? There are a lot of people who say that they're not sure. Now, it could be that some people who say they're not sure, like, I've never heard of this before. But I did follow-up questions where I would ask people, after asking them, do you think that this, do you believe this? Do you not believe this? Are you not sure? I said, well, what did you hear that made you, that brought you to this particular set of beliefs there? And so people would say, not sure. Some people would just say, I've never heard of that before. But there were also a lot of people who said, like, there's a lot going on out there. I hear these stories. I'm not really sure what to believe. And essentially, where there's smoke, there's fire, right? And so that's what I worry about.
The
Again,
National Enquirer headline, right? Like where there's like
yeah,
one word might have a bit of truth to it.
exactly. Or, like you're on social media and you've got some friends who are deep into conspiracy. So you're not, but you see this going back and forth and say, like, was Obama born in the US, right? Is he from Kenya? And then if you don't pay much attention to politics, you might not gravitate to it, you might not grab on it. But, if we think about, was he born in the US? Like, oh, I heard something about that. Be like, oh, maybe that's true. Maybe that isn't true. I'm not sure. And so that's what I really worry about. So in addition, so I like when I started my project, I was very, hopeful, right? So this was back in 2009. And I felt like, oh, this is really weird. I'm going to spend a couple of years running surveys to try to figure out, who believes this and why. And then a couple of years figuring out, here's how we can correct misinformation. And then I'll be done, sort of go home, mission accomplished. But then, sort of realizing over time that these hardcore people who really believe this strongly aren't necessarily going to give up those beliefs, right? As you said, right, presenting them with facts, they can counter argue. Every time I talk about this, I always say, like, oh, if you were to Google some topic, and I always want to give a warning in that, I don't want to send people down rabbit holes, but, if you're to Google, was 9/11 an inside job by the Bush administration, it will take you to different videos. Spare change is one that, so again, I sort of
I remember
hesitate
that. It
to
was a
talk
film,
about this.
right?
Yes. Yep. I hesitate to, recommend that because I don't want to send your listeners down those rabbit holes, but, that it's really hard to convince people. So, over time, I've moved from thinking that we want to really focus on converting the believers to also saying like there's this kind of low-hanging fruit there of people who say like, I'm not really sure what to think. And, we can change their minds, at least in the short term. And so I guess that's somewhat optimistic in that saying, just because there's some hardcore believers we can't move doesn't mean that we have to give up, because there's this other group that we can target. These people who say that they're not sure, they're sort of in the middle, that we can actually affect.
Well, with them, you might be able to have a reasonable conversation, right? There actually can be dialogue. Let's take a pause. And when we come back, we will continue the conversation with my guest today, Adam Berinsky. We're talking about his book, Political Rumors, Why We Accept Misinformation and How to Fight It. You can connect with Adam on all platforms, Adam Berinsky or variations thereof. You can find him at MIT by going to berinsky.mit.edu. Here comes that pause. I'll be right back.
Hang on just a sec. Before we take that pause, I want to talk about how much I love technology as a tool for health management. Today's show is supported by Signos, empowering us to optimize our metabolic health by transforming real-time glucose data into personalized, AI-driven insights that help us understand our body's unique responses and build sustainable habits for lasting wellness. You know what's wild? I started tracking my glucose with Signos because I was tired of the afternoon crash, like religiously tired at 3 p.m. every single day. And I thought there's got to be something going on here beyond just needing more coffee. Here's what's actually happening. When you eat carbs, your blood sugar spikes. Your body releases insulin to move that sugar into your cells for energy. But if you're insulin resistant, and honestly, 88% of Americans are metabolically unhealthy, that sugar just hangs out in your bloodstream instead. That's when you get the weight gain, the fatigue, all of it. So Signos pairs this tiny biosensor with an AI-powered app that shows you in real time how food, stress, sleep, and movement affect your glucose. The coolest part? You get alerts when your glucose is spiking with suggestions like, take a quick walk, and it actually works. I learned that my healthy granola was spiking me like crazy, but adding a handful of almonds completely changed the curve. The data is eye-opening. We make 227 food decisions a day. Imagine having personalized insights guiding each one. I'm sleeping better, I have way more consistent energy, and I finally understand what my body actually needs versus what my stress brain thinks it needs. Signos took the guesswork out of managing my weight and gave me personalized insights into how my body works. With an AI-powered app and biosensor, Signos helped me build healthier habits and stick with them. Right now, Signos has an exclusive offer for our listeners. Go to Signos.com, that's Signos.com, and get $10 off select plans with code HHTR. That's Signos.com, code HHTR, for $10 off select plans today. Now let's take that quick pause. We'll be right back. Harvesting Happiness is rooted in science. Our work facilitates applied positive psychology practices through media and consulting. We're committed to sound ideas for better well-being, leading to increased life satisfaction and a better world for everyone. We're not into pseudoscience or quick fixes. We're focused on common sense backed by rigorous research. Healthy critical thinking is the foundation for our discussions. We encourage you to challenge preconceptions and explore ideas with a curiously discerning mind. Collaboration with our guests is united by an inclusive vision to boost resilience, critical thinking, communication, and problem solving through civilized discourse and pleasurable relational engagement for everyone. Each day, we have the intellectual freedom to be happy or the liberty to be miserable, regardless of external circumstances. If you or someone you know is struggling with mental health, please seek support because good psychological health is vital to the achievement of a healthy and satisfying life. Visit harvestinghappiness.com for psychosocial and educational services that boost emotional and social intelligence. And we're back, continuing the conversation with Adam Berinsky about public perception, the psychology behind public acceptance of misinformation and political rumors. Let's get back to it.
Okay, Adam, help. Give us some tools and strategies, because the ones that I've been working on, maybe they're only moderately successful, but maybe not.
Yeah. So I should say, so the title of my book, Why We Believe Misinformation and How to Fight It is, I should say, as I always say, I made a lot more progress on that first part than the second part. So, in terms of looking for solutions, there's no magic bullet. There's no magic solution that's going to fix everything. When I talk to groups, I always tell people, I know you brought me in because you want me to say, here's the 3 easy things you need to do to fix the misinformation problem.
Yes, please.
And I always say, I'm not going to do that because I can't. And anyone who says that they can is a snake oil salesman, and you should run away. I've talked to a lot of international audiences as well, so I've learned the comparable terms for snake oil salesmen in other countries and other cultures. But I think that there is this kind of notion that there are these very simple solutions, and if only we could implement them, then this problem would go away. So, one thing to think about is critical thinking skills, or kind of thinking about media literacy.
Amen.
And so this is really important. I don't want to say, I don't want people to think that I'm about to say that critical thinking isn't important. But, critical thinking is a big part of a conspiratorial mindset, right? Kind of thinking about that. So I'm often struck by Russia Today, which is the propaganda arm of the Russian government that's outward facing other countries, right? The motto of Russia Today is question everything, right? And so I think what's really important is, thinking it's important to be critical, but we can have those skills honed to such a point that we're not going to trust anything, right? And so when we think about that, we want people to be critical, but if they're critical of what they read, to a certain degree, that's good. But if they're critical of everything they read and everything they see, then they're not going to believe anything, right? So, sort of taking it to a logical extreme, sort of questioning everything is believing nothing. And that's really difficult. So, I think that it is really important when we think about this is that, in some ways, critical thinking, media literacy skills are both a solution but also a further problem there. That, we want them, when people say we want them to trust the media, we have particular media in mind. And so when we say we want people to have critical views of media that they shouldn't trust, then sometimes that spills over into mainstream media. And I think in large part, that's why we are where we are today, is that it is the case that sort of being critical of some media can become critical of all media, and that sort of I don't want to go postmodern, but that's kind of this notion of that if I'm questioning my reality and my truth, then what is reality and what is truth? And I think it's really important to kind of to keep in mind having practical solutions that are based in critical thinking, but that at a certain point, critical thinking can be kind of like the snake that eats itself.
I like your point that you're making. I do get what you're saying. And then I think that part of what's going on now is about movie making, right? Like if anybody listening, or you yourself have spent any time with lawyers, a good trial lawyer will say that my strategy is always about the movie, the narrative that I'm crafting to defend my position. Mm-hmm. And I think so much of what's going on in government today is about that, especially when it gets revised after the fact with those alternative facts.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, it is, think about the old Daniel Patrick Moynihan line of like, you're entitled to your own opinions, but you're not entitled to your own facts.
Yeah.
That came from a time where there was a lot less polarization. You mentioned political polarization before, kind of the distance between the parties that you had, he was a member of the Senate at a time where It was more of a sort of communal, maybe even clubby, right? And sort of, I don't want to romanticize the past in that regard, but that, that members of Congress, especially senators, could have discussions, disagreements over policies, but still start with the same basic facts, saying like, here's the state of the world. Here is what's going on out there. And we might disagree on how to solve that problem, but we're going to agree that there is a problem. And I think, as the Democrats and the Republicans have moved apart politically, there's less common ground, not just about policy, but about how we think about how the world operates there. And so I think it's really, sort of, again, like I say, I'm much better at diagnosing problems, as I said, than coming up with solutions. But, how do we get out of a situation where the parties, Democrats and Republicans, look at the same, sort of current state of the U.S., but look at it through very different lenses and think. And I'm talking here not about ordinary people, but I'm talking about politicians, right? The people who are making these decisions. And if we can't have agreement on facts, then how can we have any compromise on policy?
Point well taken. And, a lot of what's going on in politics today, when you look at budget cuts that are about to happen, and you think about, let's say, red states versus blue states and the amount of money that the red states take for these services that are going to be cut, that the residents of those states are the ones that voted for Trump, let's say, and they're going to be damaged. They're going to be impacted greatly by these changes. And maybe that's the way it needs to happen. Like when you feel it in your pocket, that's when it will shift.
So I think that may be true, but I guess that I'm less optimistic. And again, I think this gets back to thinking about how ordinary people think about politics. Most of the people, most of the time, aren't paying attention. And so, like, even if there are tangible costs, they're not necessarily going to make those ties to particular policies. But I think what this gets at is like, who are the actual, bad, guys and gals here, right? Like, who are the villains of the story? I think in many ways are politicians, sort of when I spent my whole life, studying mass political behavior. So I said, like, I'm on the reception side. I think about how ordinary people are dealing with politics there. And, often when I give talks, people would say, like, are you basically just saying that folks are idiots? And so I was like, no, I'm not. It's like that they're disengaged, right? They're rational. They've made a choice that they have busy lives, that they only are engage with politics in a more superficial way. And the way they do that is I pick my team. Am I a Democrat or a Republican? And I trust that the politicians of my team, of my party, are going to be good faith actors, right? That they're going to make decisions that are in line with the values there. And so, if we have a case where politicians are not behaving well, and I think that throughout history there's been misinformation on both the left and the right. But I think it's very clear, sort of speaking as an empirical social scientist, I'm very data driven. I look at the data and see there's a lot more coming from the right than the left today. So when I think about who are the villains in this current story, it's politicians who are not being good faith brokers and engaging with real evidence there. So, thinking about the case of voter fraud, the 2020 election, right? There is lots of evidence that it really was one of the most well-run, well-engaged elections in history, right? And so notions of voter fraud are not at all supported by the evidence there. But, sort of, it's hard to get politicians, Republican politicians, to say that. So earlier you said that there's the fear, like if I speak against Trump, if I speak against this party line, like there was voter fraud, someone's going to come and knock me out in a primary, right? And so We can
Or
just look again
worse.
at Liz Cheney, right? So like that's what happened there.
I think there's
And so,
visceral,
yeah.
physical fear of physical harm to themselves
And
or their
so yeah,
families.
no, and rightfully so. What
Yes,
just happened in Minnesota, so what
yes.
happened a few years ago, the plot to kidnap the governor of Michigan.
Gretchen
Um,
Whitmer. But this
yeah,
is this is cuckoo
this
for
is
Cocoa Puffs.
yeah, no, I mean but so I do think that, I think if folks are looking for a villain here, like I said, I think it's not the ordinary people, right? I think that they're victims as well. It's these politicians there. And so again, though it gets us to a point where, so like, well, what's the solution? The solution is get better
Yes,
politicians.
but not many people want the job, right? It takes a certain
Yeah.
kind of person to want the job and have the fortitude to go through the vetting process.
Hmm.
And in general, a lot of these people are not the cream of the crop because the cream of the crop doesn't want the job.
Yep. I could see this in retirement. They sort of retirement rates of members of Congress. But also, in some ways, it's even worse than that, is that of the people who have the job, right? I think a lot about incentives and behavior. Like, how can we get people to do what we would like them to do, right? And so politicians, how can we get them to work in a fact-based environment where they have
Yeah.
evidence? The problem is that, if you don't do that, sort of looking at Trump, looking at some other politicians, if you just say like, oh, this is all lies and misinformation, then you're rewarded, right? Sort of thinking about, Trump 2024. There's, I could talk, there's lots of, right? It's not necessarily that people were saying like, I love Trump, I want to have that. There was definitely, worry about the economy, but, enough people were comfortable enough with a former president who led an insurrection and was not, clearly not at all interested in facts, to elect them again there. And so if I'm a politician, I look at and say like, well, Trump, impeached, not convicted, had federal convictions, versus someone like Liz Cheney who stood up for the truth, and say like, I look at their fates, like, as a politician, do I want to be Trump or do I want to be Liz Cheney? If I want to win office, if I want to keep my job, more likely to be Trump than Liz Cheney, which is, again, that's a depressing story. So I'm sorry, I keep coming back to you offer these rays of hope, and I keep saying like, no, 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 no,
Well,
let's
it's a
get back to
dour
the
Friday.
depressing. Yeah.
Maybe it's just a dour Friday.
Yeah.
Well, but I think that's part of my job, right? Is like
Yeah.
to be the hope holder.
It's good. I need that. Yes.
Yeah.
No, I'm not a lot of fun at parties, the last few years talking
No,
about
it's
the
hard.
state of the world. Yeah.
It is really, really hard. I also think that the hope is that people will become fatigued by
Hmm.
what is when they see how it hits their pockets, when they see how
Hmm.
it hits education, when it see how it hits their opportunities. That's when the change will occur. And maybe that is less work for those of us trying to debunk, the
Hmm.
nonsense. It's just
Yeah.
like, okay, this is what the population wanted, a slim, narrow victory, right?
Hmm.
But then we have to see it unfold. And
Yeah.
what value do we hold for democracy as we have known it in our lifetimes? Like
Yeah.
you, Adam, myself, right? Because we're of a certain age that our children may not ever experience.
Yeah. I mean, so I would say that, I mean, this, sort of, history ebbs and flows, right? So
Yes,
I think that
there's
that's
hope
right.
in that.
Right. I guess that one thing, not to bring another depressing thought into this, but allow me to bring another depressing thought is, like if we're basically reliant on like, so things get bad and then you replace the party in power, if things get bad again, then you can flip things again, right? And so
Yes.
thinking about, and I think long term, we really do need to think as a country. And again, I'm better at sort of identifying problems and looking at identifying solutions. But I think we really need to think about, how sustainable is this system? If it's just basically, people implement policies that don't work. And so the other party comes in and those policies don't work. And then we go again. It's sort of a musical chairs kind of thing. But at a basic level, if this is happening because politicians are not engaging with the facts, right? If they're not engaging with expertise, they're not involving expertise,
Well,
then
maybe they
then we're
are.
in a really bad shape. Yeah.
Maybe they are, but they don't like what they're being told. In other words,
Yeah.
the typical white older male politician is a dinosaur in the America that we have today. And that's part of the problem, right? The America today is every color of the rainbow. It's a melting pot. The melting pot part was always the case. But in the past, we had deferred to the white, wealthy, older man. And that no longer represents who America is and what America needs. And that's part of the problem, at least in my view.
Yeah, no, but I do think that there is this more general problem though of, and this is not just true in politics, in every field, kind of trust in experts has gone down over time. So trust in the media, trust in scientists,
Well,
trust
everybody's a
in
trusted expert.
education, right? And it's right. So, I think that there is this larger problem in that, there's always been a theme in American history about kind of the distrust of elites. So, who are these people telling us what to do? But, there was a long period of time where, thinking about, sort of scientific gains over the 20th century, sort of what happened I'm thinking a lot about this given, the current attacks on higher education, but, a lot of sort of the post-World War II explosion in American technology was driven by this partnership between scientists and universities and government officials who are trying to kind of help the US progress. And if we distrust scientists, then we're losing a key thing there, right? If we distrust the media, right? If it's like, oh, that's just fake news, then who do we trust? And sort of what's going on with medical, sort of the medical world these days too. Thinking about, the what's happening in Health and Human Services with vaccines. Like this was a miracle, right? That the kind of the I'm of an age where, right, the polio vaccine was in well use before I was born, but that my parents' generation remembered that time, and
Yes.
we're
Same.
forgetting that, right?
Same.
And it's right, it's sort of thinking about this. So I think, and so the misinformation problem is one big part of this, big problem in politics, but it ties into this larger question about trust in experts and thinking about who gets to decide, what is evidence for policy and what isn't, but not just political policy, but medical policy, public health.
Well,
It's very
clearly some
scary.
TikTok famous influencers are, the new experts, both in healthcare and government. So,
Yeah.
I mean, and maybe that also part of the problem is the accessibility of constant data 24/7 and where people's attention
Mhm.
flows because
Yeah.
they're getting these little nuggets, very quick hits
Yeah.
of data. And it
Right.
doesn't matter if they're real.
Yeah, no, and again, it gets at, thinking about, I talked about the bad actors in politics, right? If we're talking about medicine, alternative medicine, there's tons of bad actors there, right? And
Yes.
right, it's not that they're trying to necessarily, harm public health, but they're trying to sell their supplements. Right? They're trying, basically, there's a financial incentive for them to do that, to get that bad information out there. So, I've, in my work, I've talked to different doctors groups, and they have these horror stories about patients who come to them having done different forms of alternative medicine, and the people who are selling that medicine are making lots of money, right, doing
Yeah.
that. It's not in the public health, but again, sort of thinking about the bad actors there. There's a lot of money in bad information. And so
Yes,
that's
I
a
agree with
big
you.
problem. Yeah.
But I want to say one thing about alternative medicine, because I think that not all alternative medicine is bad, and not all Western medicine is good.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of Western medicine, and this is probably a whole other show as well, it's very easy to write a prescription for a medication for somebody than it is to take the time to teach them lifestyle interventions that would solve their problem.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And that's because of the state of medical care too.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's about the, sort of, I guess what I'm talking about are not the people who are trying to like change your life. So, sort of like
you're talking about, I understand, like the supplements that are going to,
right. I'm 55 now. It's like, I got to stop eating ice cream and like that's a lifestyle change.
Yeah.
But that I don't worry about that. It's like, I need to do that. But then there's someone out there who says, I'm going to sell you a pill, that this magic herb that will allow you to eat all the ice cream that you want and you don't need to worry.
Yes.
And that's a concern.
That's snake oil.
And that's exactly.
And people will believe it because they're hopeful, because it's the easy way out.
I would, if I could buy a pill that would allow me to eat all the ice cream I want, I would be the first in line for that. So, yeah.
Oh gosh. Well, we can talk more about this at another time, because I really do enjoy this kind of conversation. And it's something I think about a lot, and because it ties into happiness, right? It ties into our own subjective well-being and the pursuit of a good life. And all this nonsense has really messed with people's daily experience and their relationships.
And again, right, it's the bad actor, right? These are not people who are like when we're talking about healthcare, right? These are not people who are trying to make you happier. These are people who are trying to line their pocket. And this is right. This is a big issue. It's a similar sort of thing in politics, right? These are not people who, there are some people who have, views that I disagree with, who genuinely believe them, right? Who think that this actually is the right path for the U.S. to take. But there's a lot of other people who don't believe that, but see, like, here's the path to re-election, is like basically doubling down on misinformation, not because I think that it's right, but because I think it's what's going to get me reelected and what's going to help my party.
Not my people, not my constituents, right? You have a lot of the constituents in these areas who are hopping mad at what's going on in their state, because they didn't sign up for this, right? They didn't sign up for their present reality.
Yep. Yeah. That's a whole nother conversation.
A whole other conversation. And we need to end on a hopeful note.
Okay, please. Yes.
Yes. And the hopeful note, we should each have one little kernel. I mean, for me, it's that if we really take the time and energy to do good things for the people that are in our immediate environment, control the things that we can, and focus there, it helps to diffuse a little bit of the other stuff.
Yeah. So I would say, sort of the hopeful note that I've been taking, so when I say there's no magic bullet, right? There's no magic solution that's going to fix everything. That doesn't mean that there isn't anything that we can do. It doesn't mean that there's no hope, but it just means we need to adjust our expectation. Like, no one's going to come in and make this go away, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't try to do things. So it talks about, having, sort of separating the message from the messenger and having effective messengers. That's not a magic solution, right? Maybe that will move the beliefs of, people 2 or 3%, but, sort of nudging people's beliefs towards truth a little bit is better than doing nothing at all. So I think like a lot of what I've been trying to do when I talk to policymakers and I talk to other practitioners is I want to get people excited about small changes, right? So, if I talk to someone and I, say like, oh my God, this is horrible, how can we fix this? I say, well, we can't fix it, but we can get people to maybe stop sharing so much bad information online. We can get them to maybe move their beliefs a little bit. We can focus on these people who say that they're not sure. I want to get people excited about that, because those are things that we can do. But if we're going to say like, yeah, that's fine, but I want the magic solution,
No
we're
such
never going to
thing,
find
right?
that.
With
Right? And
anything.
so,
Yeah,
right. So,
I'm with you.
like my mission right now is to get people excited about small changes, like small realistic changes. And there are things that we can do, and we need to keep thinking about that.
Keep doing it, like act locally,
Yeah.
to the people and places that we have direct connection.
And even if we just do a little bit, thinking about, so, I don't want to get all academic, but I'll get academic for a second, is thinking about, I talk about counterfactuals, like what would the world look like if we didn't do anything? And so, I said like, well, if we don't try anything, right, the counterfactual is not this other world where everything is fixed. So people are always looking for the magic solution that's just down the road. And so that's what they have in mind as their counterfactual. It's like, right, if we, we just need to keep looking for this thing that's going to fix everything. That's not there, right? If we have a realistic counterfactual mind, saying like basically where we are today, where things are not good, why not try to make them just a little bit better, but also get excited about making things a little bit better? Because the alternative is not the magic, wonderful world where everything is great, wine and roses. The alternative is the kind of crap we're living in today. And so, let's think about that and get excited about some small changes.
I'm with you. And, do our bit, whatever that bit looks like. Adam Berinsky, thank you so much for sharing part of your day with me. We're talking about his book, Political Rumors, Why We Accept Misinformation and How to Fight It. You can know more, learn more, and connect with Adam Berinsky on all platforms. You can find him at berinsky.mit.edu. We'll have to hang out again, do a follow-up.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on Harvesting Happiness today. This is Lisa Cypers Kamen on behalf of my guest, Adam Berinsky, wishing you kind thoughts, kinder words, and the kindest of actions. Until next time, remember, happiness is an inside job. Happiness is your inside job. Please go out and rock your day and remember to be kind to one another. Want to explore more sound ideas for better well-being? Check out our new bonus edition content at More Mental Fitness by Harvesting Happiness on Substack and Medium. Subscribe, listen, and share hundreds of downloadable episodes wherever you get your podcasts. Connect with and follow us on most social media channels. To learn more about lifestyle management and mental fitness consulting services, please visit harvestinghappiness.com. Harvesting Happiness and More Mental Fitness are produced by Lisa Cypers Kamen, Andrea Mengele, Robin Boyd, Andrea Daly, and the excellent team at Podfly Productions, including Eric Begay, Kimberly Beck, and Alec Guess, in collaboration with TogiNet Radio, KBUU, RadioMalibu.net, and is available on PRX, the Public Radio Exchange.